Alright, so this is going to be a tutorial on how to show you how to make an X-based cuff and a 3D piece of candy on top of those X-based cuffs. So the first one there I showed is one I made. It's kind of holiday decorated, and that is a 2X high cuff. The one I'm holding currently is a 1X high cuff. You'll see many different tutorials for 1X, 2X, 3X. Those are the three that are most common. Once you get to 4X, 5X, anything like that, it's going to take up a good portion of your forearm. So those are the two most recent ones I've made, and they're kind of small for candy, but they're kind of a nice size and really easy to get started with. I should be grabbing some others here for you to show. The next one up will be one called a UFO cuff. So this one's quite a bit larger, as you can see, in just relation to the, armhole, anything like that. And this one is a single. And all of the large cuffs that are based off, they're going to be coming from a single strand. So you may see people tie these off, hand these out. They're really good for trades, anything like that. But all of our X-based cuffs are going to be based off of a single strand of beads. I should be grabbing here some other examples to show you. This is one I made for Portal. It says thinking with portals on it. And this was a little bit larger 3D cuff, and it has some extra strong beads between the X's, but again, it's all going to be an X-based cuff. So however many X's you make your inside base, that's how tall your cuff is going to be, that's how high it will come up on the arm. This one here is a simple X-based cuff, and just the beading and the different colors that we use will kind of make it come across and look a little bit different, but that right there is just a standard X-based cuff, and it's what I'll be showing you how to make today. So we've got one last example here, and it's actually the first cuff that I ever made, first piece of candy that I ever made. And got some neon colors there, and I thought they looked really beautiful with those kind of black pearlescent beads. Kind of waiting for the camera to focus there. But again, this is all going to be X-based cuff. That's a 3X tall cuff. Quite comfortable around my wrist and my upper arm. So to get started, we're going to need a blunt plastic needle. You can get these at the craft store, anything like that. They could be called yarn needles. They're usually in with like the extra pieces that people use for knitting. They kind of help you weave in ends on knitting projects, so they're usually found with those tools in like Joann's or Michael's. This is the elastic that I use. It's a soft cotton wrapped elastic. That one there is a 1mm width or diameter around, and that certain package is going to be, it's Doris, and it's 15 yards, and it's just a white piece. Little scissors are handy. I just use little snips to keep from cutting too much or being unable to handle them very well. And there I just have some leftover string from a previous project, so I'll just start my next project with that, and if I need more I can always add more and attach at any time. So that is the really cool part about candy. You want to pick some beads. Usually you can do a two-tone cuff. Sometimes you can do a four-tone cuff, so it just depends on what you're in the mood for. So I just picked a couple of colors that would kind of stand out on camera. And you can always use clear or white to extend the life of the colored beads. It helps them stand out a little bit further, and sometimes you can add some fun accents like lettering or also some metallic beads. which I really love the look of. So I got the 4 there together. I have a light purple, kind of a teal, a clear, and a gold, and some black and white letters. So I'll go ahead and get started. So first thing you want to do is get your beads all ready to go. I have some large plastic containers with little dividers in them, but I got so many different types and colors of beads that I ended up being able to sort them out, put them in plastic baggies a lot easier than it was to sort into the large containers. So as it is right now, that's just how I have them. I'll probably be getting some other ways to store them better in the future. So I'll just thread the elastic through the needle there, and this is a plastic needle. It's very, very dull, so it's easy to kind of maneuver it through the beads, but it's not going to poke you, or it's not going to hurt you if you poke yourself with it. And it has a very large eye for the thread to go through, or the elastic to go through. So we're going to do 2 of one color, and then we're going to do 1 of another color, and then back to 2, and then we can slide those on there, and then back to 1. Right now, since my elastic is quite long, I can thread these on without worry of them falling off. You do want to start with a pretty long piece for any 3D cuff that you think you may use. Singles don't use up that much elastic, so you can use a pretty short piece with them. Some of them you wouldn't even use the needle with if you just were stringing on the beads and then tying it off in a single. But what we're going to do is make a single, and we're going to keep the tail of the single very, very long so as to work through the rest of the piece and make it 3D and stand out. So this first piece here should be pretty similar if you've ever made singles before. So we're going to make a single, and then we're going to build up off of that, and then we're going to build out. So it's up to you as to what size works best with your wrist or whoever you're making it for. I like to measure it up against myself, but usually it will be 10 sets of the doubles, so it'll be 20, and then 1 in between each one of them. So I just count it out that way. So it looks like 5, 6. So 2 more to go. 2 more sets, that is, to go. And it's just 2, 1, 2, 1. Pretty easy process there. And then you want to make sure when you're getting down to the end of it that you make sure and thread in the one more missing, or not missing color, but the one color in between the sets of 2. So my camera cut out there, so I jumped right into tying it off. You want to make sure and tie at least 3 or 4 knots together, and tie it pretty much as tightly as you can. So now we have the yarn, or the elastic, sticking out of the bead that was by itself. And then you're going to do 1 of the double color, 1 of the single color, and then 1 of the double color again. And this will help you keep the pattern of the X's throughout, building up of the cuff. So now we're going to decide how tall we're going to make this to go up on our arm. So I've decided with this one, we're only, we're going to build this one up, let's see, we ended up making it just a 1X. I'm looking at it here in front of me while I'm recording the voiceover. So I ended up making it a 1X cuff. So the shortest one that we can do is still making it 3D. So as you can see, we're going to make the X's, and you're going to do 1 of the double color, 1 of the single color, 1 of the double color. As it goes through, I thread them, and I don't worry about pulling them too tight at this time, just because I know that I'll go back through and kind of tighten the elastic between each one. So now the important part is just getting them on there and not having them be tangled up, and kind of sitting as they should, and then I'll go through and tighten them up to make sure that it's nice and rigid so that the cuff itself isn't very sloppy, so that it doesn't slide down, and so that it keeps a nice rigid shape when it's not being worn. So you notice that I do have a lot of extra elastic, and that's totally normal. And just because I was on camera there, I didn't pull it out very far to the side, but any way that works for you. I just kind of wind it up in my hands to pull it through a little bit faster. So as you can see, I am putting on the needle one of the double colors, so my dark green, one of my single colors, which is the light purple, and then one of my double colors again. And then when it comes back down to the cuff, I'm going through the single color that is on the band itself. So I'm going to go through that light purple, and I only have to dip down to that one, and then I'll string on 3 more and dip down to the next, string on 3 more and dip down to the next. So seeing it from the side, it kind of looks like cat ears for a little bit, which is pretty cool. And you just want to keep going around doing that. It's pretty easy to do, especially at this first step, because if you mess up or anything like that, you can just pull it back out and you still have your single that you created, that very first band. And if you decide, you know what, I'm not going to make a cuff out of this, I'm not going to do a 3D, I'm not going to make an X-based cuff, nothing like that, you still have a single that you've tied off, and that it should be fine to be worn on its own. Important thing to mention is that you want to try this out on yourself if it's going to be for you before you get to this step. So you want to make sure that it fits you well. It's okay if it's a little bit snug, because as you build the 3D cuff out, the pulling of the outside decoration, so when we start to build out of the cuff, it will actually pull it away from your wrist a little bit and it will loosen up. So it's okay to be that a little bit snug at that step. Yeah. So we're just going to keep going there. So this will be the last singular loop that you make on that first row. So you're going to go through the single purple bead and then go ahead and go up the first 2. So you're going to go up one of the green beads and then one of the purple beads. It'll be kind of up at the top of the pyramid. So then at this point, since I've already gone through the whole round, I'll go through and just tighten them. So I kind of pull them and just kind of go around in the direction that you created it and then you worked it in. Then just kind of keep moving along and tugging it tight. You don't want it to be so that the string has no slack at all, so you still want it to be able to move on its own if it's pulled on, but you don't want it to be loose or floppy. So this will be the last one here. And so now you notice that my elastic thread is coming through the top of that very first pyramid sort of shape I created. You see there it's kind of rigid. So it's not super rigid, but it's enough that it doesn't flop away on its own. So now I'll kind of hold it in place a little bit since we pulled it nice and taut. I'll hold it for the next couple of rounds that we're going to make, and you're going to do the exact same thing for the second round. So we're going to go from purple to purple, just like you did before, but we're going to go top of each little peak there. Looks kind of like little cat ears. You're going to go from the top of one to the other, and we're going to make a second round of little pyramids. So again, we're going to go green, purple, green, and that'll keep us creating that X shape. And since I am holding on to it with my right hand, I'll pull it through with my left hand. It looks kind of like a little bit backwards, but it's just how it works out to keep it a little bit more taut on the second round. And so you see, I created another little pyramid. Kind of realized I was out of frame there, but so you can see how it's making that next row of pyramid shapes. So again, green, purple, green, and we're going to go into the top of the very next pyramid. And as you go along, they stick out a little bit more, so it's kind of easier to see them, and it's a little bit easier to get the needle going into them. So you can see here we're kind of making a second layer of that shape of the little pyramids, little triangles, little cat ears, whatever you want to call them. And that'll go from peak to peak all around the second row. And then you're just going to keep going. So you can see my camera cut out there again. I kept running out of memory, so I had to clear it off and record some more. As you can see, I'm still going around on the second row, so you didn't miss anything, I promise. And so we're kind of closing into where I started the second row, and so it's going to be really similar to how we closed up the first row, and you're going to be doing a really similar thing. At this time, it's okay for this piece to be completely flat. Trust me, I know it's really weird. It was totally weird when I was making my first piece of candy. I was like, wait, this thing is supposed to go around my wrist. Why is this all, why is it flat, you know? But as you pull a little bit tighter, which we will go around and do, this starts to kind of pick up a cone shape. And then as you put the last row into place, then you'll start to see it firm up. So now we're going to go through that base of one, and then we're going to go up the top to the top of the pyramid, and we're going to be coming out of the first stitch of that second row that we created. So we can see, yeah, it is kind of loose, so we're going to go pull it taut, and just going to go around and do the exact same thing. Pretty easy to do once you get the hang of it. You can use your whole hand like I'm using, it makes it a little bit easier too. and just make sure that none of your beads get wound around and kind of tangled. So there, we're going to pull that very last one there. So now it's starting to get a little bit of a cone shape, you can kind of see. At this point it'll be kind of rigid. You want it to hold its shape and texture. So if you kind of bend it one way, it's going to hold it. Bend it another way. You don't want it to be kind of falling down at this point. You want it to be pretty taut. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go around and make the top row. Now, the cool part is, since we already have the purple beads, what we're going to do is we're going to go purple bead to purple bead, just like we did before, but we're only going to be using the 2 green beads in between, like we had done on that very first base single of this cuff. So we're going to go 2 here, and then we're going to go into the top of the purple next. We're going to pull that there, and as soon as we start to pull this one into place, it's going to start to firm up and be more vertical. So this will start to create that straight, rigid shape that you're going to be looking for. And there you can see the center of our X and each of the sides. So as you go a little bit further with this top row, it's going to look more and more like a straight, rigid cuff that you're used to seeing. It'll help you keep this firm, rigid shape all the way throughout the cuff itself. And when we start to build on it in a 3D fashion, the more straight and rigid the inner cuff, the better the end result and the more sharp your cuffs are going to look. So again, we're just going to do 2, next purple. And you can definitely see the differences on my sides of the work there of what I've already done versus what I have yet to do. It's standing up straight on its own, I don't have to do anything, and it's creating those nice even X's. And before we are through with this top row, we will pull it back, but we want to see that it's maintaining its shape on its own. So it kind of snaps back to a nice curved shape. It's definitely what we want to see. And we're going to keep on going around. So we'll be closing in on our ending of this top row, and this is our finishing row. If you wanted to add more X's, if you wanted to create more than just a 1X base, you would just keep going with the same steps that we laid out before, and every row is half an X, so you want to complete a full X to create your X cuff. So you would do 4 for 2X cuff. So as you can see here, I strung the last and I pulled it through a purple, 2 teals, and another purple. And that's just to kind of base, get my base anchored together. I didn't tie anything yet, so we're going to go around and just pull it taut. And again with this, it's good for it to be nice and snug, but you definitely still want the bracelet to be able to stretch, because otherwise you're going to be looking at candy that doesn't fit over your hands. I noticed that mine was a wee bit tight where I was pulling it taut, so it is kind of important to go through and just kind of feel, is this stretchy enough to get over my hand, anything like that. So I'm kind of going through and just wiggling to loosen that up a little bit, and this is important for a nice, good fit. And you just kind of keep working around, working around. So now I've gotten to a point where I want to tighten up that top row. So I'm going to go around again there. And make sure they don't get tangled up. It's very often they do. And we're going to kind of look at it there. Make sure that it's keeping its shape. Make sure it looks good from up above. You want it to spring back. Yeah, so looking very good. And you can see my X's there, very clean, very crisp. It's going to be a nice base for our 3D build out. Yeah. So you can see the X's there, the centers are purple, and then each one of the legs is going to be our kind of green color. So sorry I got out of frame there for a little bit, but I'm just kind of tightening things up some. So my camera skipped out a little bit again here, but what we ended up doing, we're going to do building out. We're going to do something very similar. So instead of building up, we're building out dimensionally from the cuff as our base. So we're going to start with, we're going to be moving purple to purple. So it's our centers. And with this, I decided to use clear and gold. So clear are the sides and gold is my center. So that's the part that will stick out. And again, it kind of looks like cat ears from the side there, and that's what will create the walls to our 3D build out. So we're going to use 2, 1, and 2. So 2 of your side color, 1 for your center, and 2 for this side color again. That will take it back down. And the centers there, like I said, the gold metallic beads are a very nice touch, and they kind of create that nice visual point without having to use the entire side there. So instead of using 5 metallic beads, you can use 2 of a solid color, and then 1 that is bright, somewhat special bead. If you had some lettering that you wanted to appear kind of sporadically along the cuff, if you had maybe initials or something like that, that's not very many letters long, you could put them in place of that gold bead. If you had any other specialty beads like animal shapes, or if you had like skulls or anything like that, if you're making a seasonal cuff, I know they make seasonal beads like little ghosts or pumpkins or something like that for Halloween, or little Santa Clauses or snowmen for Christmas cuffs. So another thing you can do is also, if you want to have bells throughout the edges of the cuff, instead of that gold bead, you could also put a jingle bell on there. So it's a pretty nice way to use your specialty beads up and have them show, and not have them kind of get lost in the shuffle. This particular one, I'm going to use some wording, but what I'm going to do is, after we have built out from the cuff, I'm going to string between each one of those gold beads, and then we're going to make a ring of gold around the entire cuff. So I already know what I'm planning to do. So for this, we can just use gold beads, and I don't have to change anything. In between each set of gold beads on a single X-base cuff, and about my wrist measurement, you can fit about 4 to 5 beads. So as long as I can measure out words that are shorter than 4 or 5 letters long, then they'll fit just fine. If they were 5 letters long, but I only wanted to fit 4 between each set of beads, then I could, instead of a gold one of these, I would just put one of the letters for the word that I wanted to make, so that it was already there and ready to go. So a little pre-planning at this level is good, but not necessary. So, and you can always string over the top of these as well. You can build out further. For this one, I just wanted to make a very simple 1X base cuff. Sometimes your needle will wander there and kind of get stuck in some other beads, so make sure before you pull it that it's only going through the one that you want, and that things are untangled. So as you can see, I'm doing 2 for the sides, 1 for the center. Sorry, I keep reaching across the work there. 2 for the sides, 1 for the center, and then 2 for the sides again. Now you can see we're closing it on up. And when we do that, we want to make sure and go back through the purple where our first thread started, and then we're going to go up the side of the mountain, and we're going to go through the tip of the very first bead there. So it kind of creates a little bit more tension, and it kind of allows us to pull it taut and not have our progress lost. Now we're going to go through, pull it taut, and again go through the same thing. And it's a good thing to do going through. I like to do it at the end of every row, just because I know that as soon as I let go of the elastic, it won't just spring back inside the work and kind of undo all of the tightening that I've just done. So we're just going to keep working around there. And so this is just running along the top of the cuff that we just created. So it's only kind of one layer at this point. If you look at it from the side, it's just kind of sticking out on top. Kind of looks like a little bit of a mushroom or something like that. Totally normal. And then what we'll be doing with this row is where the clear beads are, it kind of makes the legs of an elongated X. And what we're going to be doing is creating the other spots where the legs will go, which is down below on the very first row. So we kind of let it span between top and bottom. So kind of shows you there. I like to pull those out a little bit to make them a little bit easier to find, and let me make sure that I didn't count and make a mistake and only get one clear on one side and two on the other or anything like that, or mess it up. So I like to look at it from that point of view. So we're going to string on just the two clear because we already have the center of our X being that gold. We don't have to add another gold to it. So it's a great way to add a nice touch if you don't have that many beads of that color. So now we're going to go down, we're going to skip that center one, and we're going to go directly down to the bottom of the cuff. Now, if you are using a 2x base cuff, you're going to find the one that is halfway. So I can do another tutorial later if you guys want to see one for a 2x base cuff. And with that, you're going to want to find the bead that is directly below where your X started. So you can see there, it's going to be the X side. We're going to go in between using the gold center, and then the one directly below where the first one started. And this will make kind of elongated X's, or X's with long sides along the side of the cuff. The other thing that it will do is kind of create these little diamond shapes in between the X's. So depending on the colors that you choose, you can kind of play with the pattern and how it turns out. And you'll notice that I'm kind of holding it at different angles. It's to keep this taut as we move around. They're a little bit harder to go through and tighten, but we definitely can do that as well. I like to just keep as tight a pull on it as I possibly can. So this one here, we're going to go through and pull taut. So it's kind of making that diamond shape in between the X's, and there the X's kind of have a little bit longer legs on them. And then just keep continuing. So my camera jumped a little bit there, but we're still where we left off. I noticed that it paused, and so I went back and made sure that we're still at the same spot. So you can see we have a couple more X's still to go. So again, 2 more clear, and that just kind of completes the arm of each guy, each little X there, and just kind of pull it taut as you're going. It's a lot easier to keep these ones taut because you're only holding 2 beads back at a time. You aren't holding back 3 or 4 or the entire row or anything like that. So it's a little bit easier when you only have 2 at a time to deal with. In fact, this is my most favorite part of doing the cuff. So sometimes you'll notice your needle will get stuck a little bit like that. Just kind of pull it, tug, and it should come through just fine. And yeah, so there we go. I make sure that since I had to let go, make sure that everything is nice and tight. So you can see we got about 3 or 4 more sides left. Just do 2. And sorry if I keep dropping out of frame, I'm noticing that as I'm looking back on it, but at this point you should be getting pretty comfortable with it and should be getting the hang of it pretty well. And so I just kind of hold thumb and forefinger together, and that will keep the elastic nice and tight as we're moving on to the next one. I'm going to go down and get another purple bead there and pull on through. And we're just about done with this row here. And again, it should be feeling pretty comfortable at this point, knowing what to expect and knowing what you've done all the way around. And it's pretty repetitive at this point. So once you try it and you do it with your own 2 hands, it gets feeling pretty comfortable. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm getting the hang of this now. And we got 1 more side left. I want to make sure not forget about that little guy there. So we'll just string it through that first gold bead there to make sure that we have a nice side coming through. We're going to take a look at everything. Feel like it's nice and tight. We can see those X's and the diamonds, and they're keeping a pretty similar shape to each other. If you notice one kind of has an odd shape, you might want to tug on the yarn thread a little bit and see if you can tighten it up. So what I'm showing you here is we're going to go down the side, and this one takes a little bit of trouble. So we went down the side and into the purple one below, and that's past that one gold one that we just went through. So it kind of gets us back up to the top rim where we were before. And when we're up there, I'm going to continue working on this piece. So we'll just kind of go down the next arm and through the next X. So this helps us kind of keep that same tension on that row of X's. You can also tie a knot if you want to. I find that too many knots kind of tend to keep my candy from being as stretchy as I want it to be. So I'll just weave through a couple more beads and that'll keep the strength in there. So the very first time I tried this, I strung on 5 beads in between. And when I did that, it kind of bunched up, it buckled up a little bit. It wasn't very smooth. So I went back and I used 4 beads, and that tended to work a lot better. So you're noticing I'm putting on 5. I probably, it may have recorded, it may not have, but I definitely did go back and remove these because they didn't end up looking quite right. And so I removed them, and then I just strung through with 4 gold beads instead of 5. So you can kind of see them, if I show them off to the side here, you can kind of see them peeking up a little bit, and it doesn't look as clean to me as having fewer beads. So I ended up changing that. So you'll notice each one of them kind of has a peak. If you're going for a flower shape, that's totally fine, and those will tend to look good for flower shapes. but if you have extra, it'll kind of peek out to the side and it won't look as sharp or as clean as you may like. Here I'm showing some letter beads that I'm going to use and string them on. So I'll put them on and kind of let you see what it looks like when there's too many beads when you're stringing end to end to make kind of an outer perimeter ring. And so I'm spelling out stay gold because I love the gold. And what I'll do, since I'm supposed to have 5 beads in between, I'll actually string a gold one on and then get the letters on. And string it through. Sorry, hands on the camera. And then I'll pull it taut and bring it back to the camera there to kind of show you. So you can see it's not very even and it kind of sticks out one way. Really didn't care for it, so that's why I ended up undoing it and coming back to it. But there we go, I added the 1 to the end there to make it the satisfactory 5. And you can kind of see when I string it through and pull it taut, even then it doesn't look quite right. So you can see they kind of stick out a little bit. I was trying to decide there if I really liked how they looked, but I decided with no, it doesn't look clean enough, it doesn't look crisp enough. So we'll try 4 and see if that looks any better. Sure enough, it looks a lot crisper, a lot cleaner. So I decided, yep, we're going to go ahead and undo all of these, which is pretty easy to do if you just feed the needle back through. Make sure to just catch the beads when they come off, or if you have a long tail, then they'll come off on the tail. So I just ended that previous recording and I started again just to kind of show you guys the ending here. So we're just doing 4 at a time. So I'll do 4, and then each of the words I chose were 4 apiece. So those guys, we don't have to add any extra spacers or anything like that. So we're going to do 4 and going to string it through to the next gold one. Just kind of running along that way. And things will get a little bit tangled up, so you want to make sure you untangle them every single time, which can be a little troublesome. But once you get the hang of it, you'll definitely get it. So there's 4 each, and those look a lot better, a lot more flush. They aren't sticking out kind of on their own. And so here I'm going to do the lettering. So make sure and look at the way that the needle's going with each one of the words. So you also want to make sure if you're going the opposite way that you put the last word first and not the first word. So that's when I kind of realized, well, put them in the wrong order. So we're going to put gold and we're going to put it backward just because of how the needle's oriented with the candy itself. So I have gold on there. I'm going to string that through because the phrase I'm using is stay gold. And then we're going to pull that through nice and taut. And that looks a lot better personally to me. If you like the way it looked before, then definitely feel free to use more beads when you're stringing through that outer edge. I'm going to do the stay. And string through again. So we don't have to add any extra spacer beads or anything like that, which we had done before. So kind of pulling that nice and taut, and I look at it from the side and make sure that I like the way it looks. Alright, so we're going to keep doing 4. and to the next gold bead. And this part is pretty darn easy. It's just stringing through next gold bead to next gold bead. Kind of pulling it nice and taut there so you can kind of see how it's going to look. Almost done. I got 2 more left to go. So we may not have captured the very end of it here, but the important thing to do is to kind of weave back through some of the previous beads that you've used, and kind of weave your way back to either the top or the bottom, that single very first line that we started with. And when you do that, then you can tie off there. So here it'll show you a picture of the cuff when it was finally done. So like I said, it's important to remember to go back in and kind of tie it off here and there, but it's completely up to you of where you want to tie it off. Just make sure that it is nice and tied off, and not to cut the elastic too short after you make, your 2 or 3 knots in a row. I've definitely knotted off some pieces and then cut way too close, and so then I'll try to fit it on, and when I do that, it stretches the elastic enough that it will cause it to pop off, and then beads go flying everywhere, and then you have to redo all your work. So definitely test it out before, and then when you cut it, just leave some extra kind of room on there to the end. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. If you'd like to see a 2x or 3x cuff tutorial on how to build a 3D cuff from there, please let me know, and I can do that as well. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.